Okay, so one of the big takeaways for us was we all saw in the material a lot of people saying that if they had a better understanding of the synergy concepts and tools and process before they picked their project, it would have been very helpful. So this idea of a primer or an orientation activity and some rubric or checklist that you could use and apply to, is this a good project to scale, we thought would be a good follow-up to that idea that people were kind of learning as they went along about synergy. They'd already picked a project, but they didn't quite know if that was going to be the best project. And as they went along and learned more about the concepts, they realized, well, maybe we either need to get a new project or stay with the project but tweak it enough to really make it fit with these ideas of scale. So I guess that was the big one there. So go down. Let's see. Yeah, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of things around what you get in the process of project identification, I think. You know, you're considering different projects. You've got kind of pros and cons to one, but there's a process in project identification we were saying we read in the material, and that it brings clarity to each of the projects you're considering. You have to understand them better in a deeper level, and then out of that kind of one emerged as the best, most promising one to maybe scale. So there's a lot of things in that vein in here. Okay, you can go down. Oh, and a follow-up item might be a job aider tool. Oh, we already said that. Sorry, maybe we said that twice. Okay. I'm going to pick up on this one. People said that process of picking a project eventually ended up, because you had to reach a consensus with your team at some point for the most part, it ended up helping the team get buy-in and be ready, have the confidence and be kind of prepared to move forward with a big chunk of work. And we talked about project identification as a formative process and it requires discussion, analysis, and evaluation by the stakeholders or your team. It has these other benefits of helping you identify, look at your goals and objectives of your whole center, and it gives you an opportunity to pause and reflect, which we often don't do in our work because it's so hectic, to kind of then think about all of the work you're doing and through the lens of which of these projects might be the best one to scale. So that was project identification. Anything else, team, on that? Okay, then we went on to needs assessment. We said a good needs assessment can really help with identifying potential adopters. And we had this very interesting discussion about, which Gordon kind of raised, around, you know, the greatest need. When you do a needs assessment, you see all kinds of, there's a continuum or a range of need from what you might call low-hanging fruit up to potential adopters that have a lot of need, have great need. And we realized that this is challenging because we may not have all of the resources to help those with the greatest need. And so you kind of help, Tressa, would you say you can't help them all, or? Can't save them all. Anyway, so that was an interesting discussion we think was worthy of follow-up. Sometimes in needs assessment, if you scroll down a little bit, there was lots of different ways it was done. It was done formally, it was done informally. People had data that they were relying on, like you guys had already, it was a low utilization rate of 15% or whatever that made you realize it's very clear there's a need because you had existing data. So there were lots of different variations on how needs assessments were being done. And continuing to redefine the needs assessment is valuable. And where do we have, if you scroll down a little bit, we had some ideas about follow-up. So,
That's part of it.
yeah. Oh, okay, so we realize, we think it's a very important step. And we were basically saying we may not all have the skills to do it. We may not all have done it, which is actually true. Not everybody did it. And we may not even have all the skills to do really good needs assessments. So we were talking about the need maybe for more research and training around needs assessment skills.
Talk about the people as well as the project. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We also talked about the fact that we're not just defining a project, we're also defining who can go on the journey with us, who actually is positioned either from background within their college, support, all of that sort of thing, motivation, interest, et cetera. For example, if there's a Lone Ranger within a college who thinks what you're doing is the greatest on the face of the earth, but they don't have support, they're going to have a little bit difficulty getting down the road with you. So we thought that that was part of the needs assessment, as well as just is the project a valid project.
Good, thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's do a couple more, maybe on 4 and 5, and then we'll stop. We didn't do 4? Okay, that's easy. We didn't have any 4s.
We didn't have any fives.
Oh, and there you go. We were done before we thought we were done. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Who's next? You guys?
Okay. So we just did sustainability, and I think we realized that we had a certain luxury of time in being able to discuss evolution in the last session and then sustainability in this one, just those two. And having that time, I think, allowed the discussion to be very rigorous and kind of satisfying. I think I enjoyed both of our discussions very much. In this second session with Jim, we became a little bit more aware of how we were capturing some of the insights that were coming up in our discussion, maybe a little bit more nervous that like, oh, are we capturing it enough? And then also, has our discussion become too heady and kind of moved away from the spreadsheet and the kind of data that's being represented in that spreadsheet? So we tried to make sure that we were anchoring ourselves a little bit better. As far as sustainability, we, I guess, identify the main points would be that the way that we were able to engage adopters was essential to maintaining sustainability, and a lot of times that meant making those adopters part of collaborating on developing these innovations. It was oftentimes identifying some common and mutually advantageous need that would bring us together, but allowing us to get to achieve that in our own way. And a lot of times that would end up being in a very similar way, but we still had to let people proceed in their own way in order to get them fully invested and engaged. Anything else? Good.
So our second experience was a little bit similar, although instead of, we were encouraged to, instead of focusing on the data and where that led us, to focus on having a conversation about what all of the centers did. And our topic was spread. So we defined spread as reducing all of the barriers, or as many barriers as you could in your project, to allow it to spread, as Lawrence said, like butter. And we found that mostly everybody did, in one way or another, found what was potentially an obstacle or something that would be hard for their adopters to get past, and reduce that barriers, whether it's developing a toolkit or, the manual from BATAC, and that most everybody was able to identify something like that and implement it and, you know, cause spread to happen. I don't remember if there were any center that did not. But there was always, what needs to happen is to really look at it and say, in what way it was spread achieved, and what kind of spread, and all of that detail to follow. But it was a really good exercise for us to just, keep the conversation at, sort of the big picture point of view. Anybody else have anything? Okay, that was spread. Who's next?
Tag, you're in. We did a discussion on evolution. We intended it to be 10 minutes. It was 20, 30 minutes. So we were hung up on the definition. So I think we came to a consensus that evolution is something that you do as a result of an external stimulus, but there has to be an action, not just thinking about it. I think I'm okay. The group's okay with that. And so that was real valuable. And you can read our summary yourselves. So let's just move on to sustainability. We struggled a bit with this, but we came up with a list of common themes that we saw. There was a realization that there's a need to incorporate flexibility into your project right away. We wanted to incorporate flexibility in the projects. That's a common theme, but still meet the objectives. So there is this struggle between, how much can we let go and what things do we need to make sure are communicated with when we're doing this. There was also an observation that we need to reduce costs and barriers for adoption so that sustainability can be maintained. There's lots of barriers that were referenced, okay, and those are immediate and potential values, recognizing those things. Ongoing support of adopters for long-term support so that they can stay involved and active. So basically a learning community of sorts that's supported or that can be self-supporting. And that goes on to the next one, where adopters are recognizing the value of the project really helped with the sustainability. So if you have a lot of adopters that recognize the value of the materials and methods, then your chances of sustainability is a lot higher. Institutionalization and infrastructure creation is an important component for sustainability. We had a lot of discussion. I phrased it as, what happens if your project team gets hit by a bus? And I think Helen said, well, what about if they win the lottery, right? So, but the key is if something happens, then how does the project continue? That was recognized as a common theme. Centers commonly use feedback now in the form of surveys, for example, and take action to make sure that the information is assessed and implemented, and that helps your sustainability. Okay, and the centers all struggled with adopters could it actually change or shift and still have the intended impact. So again, we had a theme in there that the centers were struggling with that. So how do you sustain the quality elements of your project? And changes in administration and campus support was noted by a few centers. And then moving from a regional perspective to a national perspective was one of the immediate values that people realized under this category. So, did I cover it all? Did I leave anything out?
Okay. Thank you. I hope everyone appreciate the opportunity to rise above your individual project, to spend a morning looking at, again, from our community perspective, what's going on in these different areas, that not only in terms of reviewing the data, but actually drawing some conclusions and getting some new ideas.